Is the child asleep? My husband, who had just returned from the sauna, asked with a refreshed expression, so I coldly responded, "Don't worry, he won't wake up again." This made him panic. "What do you mean he won't wake up again? You're not saying?" My name is Candace, a 28-year-old office worker currently on parental leave. My husband Michael, to whom I have been married for 2 years, has never helped with child care or household chores, which has been a source of dissatisfaction for me. Since his family is wealthy, we live in a luxurious condominium owned by my father-in-law with our child, and it seems to outsiders like we have a happy family. It must be nice, Candace, to have married a wealthy man and to live in a fancy condominium. My sister would say this every time we met. Whenever I made a displeased face at her words, she added, "My husband doesn't earn much, and he's neither tall nor as handsome as Michael, so I get envious seeing you." My sister, 3 years older than me, had been married for about 4 years and still had no children, but she and her husband had a very good relationship, almost like friends, which I envied. My relationship with my husband was completely dominated by him treating me almost like a servant, and I felt our marriage wasn't supposed to be like this. As my sister said, my husband was popular among women due to his good looks and style, and he was aware of it. Moreover, he was a man who had everything, coming from a wealthy family, so when I got married to him, I was overjoyed, bragging to my sister and her husband that it felt like a dream. My brother-in-law was happy to hear my story, but my sister warned me, "You're getting carried away with the wedding, but be careful, Michael has a cold aura around him." My brother-in-law immediately joked, "Don't say that just because Candace is marrying a rich man." My sister quickly retorted playfully, "Marrying a poor man like you, I just can't help but feel frustrated." Her comment showcased the good-natured teasing and strong bond she shared with her husband, highlighting their loving and playful relationship. I wanted a relationship like my sister and her husband. But soon after we got married, I was surprised by my husband's true character. He had been kind while we were dating. However, after living together, he started to behave arrogantly and declared, "From today, you'll do as I say. Be grateful that you can live in such a fine condominium thanks to me." Thinking it was a joke, I laughed and asked, "What's with this sudden change?" But he angrily responded, "The answer should be yes. Don't talk back." Seeing the sharp look in his eyes made me feel uneasy right away. Although he allowed me to work after marriage, he never helped with household chores and even checked if I was cleaning and doing laundry properly. Just because you work, don't slack off on household chores. It was good that we didn't live with his parents, but I hadn't expected him to treat me like his mother would. Since our marriage, I came home right after work without doing overtime, prepared dinner, and thoroughly cleaned and did the laundry. Michael would also give detailed instructions about the meals. Use more vegetables for health. Cut down on the salt and don't repeat the same dishes. I had to laugh it off, imagining being tormented by a mother-in-law if we lived together. The food had to be piping hot. If he was about to eat, I had to hurry and prepare everything before he sat down. It would be nice if he came home on time, but there were times he returned late, and I couldn't even take a bath leisurely until he came back. Just the other night, he came home late, and I had accidentally fallen asleep while waiting for him, which led to him yelling at me. "I work late, and you go to sleep first. What are you thinking?" Even though I apologized, he wouldn't forgive me, but since his hair was a bit wet and he smelled different from the soap we use at home, I couldn't help but ask, "Did you go to the sauna after work?" Yes, that's right. I was tired, so I went to sweat it out in the sauna." He answered with an even more displeased face, but seemed a bit awkward. After that, when he returned home late, he would deliberately say, "The sauna really does refresh me." I endured for about 6 months after marrying him, but gradually the stress made it difficult for me to sleep at night. Feeling like I was about to explode with dissatisfaction towards him, I went to visit my sister on a day off to vent. Even when going to my sister's house, Michael would say threateningly, "Come back soon. If you keep hanging out, I won't let you in the house." Since our parents lived far away, I always relied on my sister whenever I had troubles. Throughout her marriage, I also sought advice from her brother-in-law, mostly expressing frustrations about my husband. In contrast, seeing her husband willingly help around the house and excel in cooking made her remark in disbelief and anger, "I can't believe there are still husbands who don't help with household chores. My husband cooks better and does so much more." My brother-in-law responded with concern, "Every family has its own situation, but it's rare to see such a domineering attitude nowadays. But let me know right away if it gets too hard on you." My sister also expressed her concern for my well-being. "Let me know at once if anything happens. I'll give Michael a piece of my mind for you." Their support made me feel somewhat relieved. However, when I returned to the apartment, Michael began angrily accusing me. "You must have been having a great time talking about me, you terrible people." He seemed to feel excluded and was sullen all day, which just made him appear childish in my eyes. About a year into our troubled marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. I reported the news to my sister before Michael, prompting her joyful remark, "Congratulations. You've beaten me to it, Candace." But this should make him a bit more considerate towards you. I hope she was right, but when I told him about the baby, all he said was, "Is that so?" "I see." His lackluster response disappointed me, and more than that, I felt uncertain about his readiness to be a father. Despite my pregnancy, Michael didn't show any inclination to help with the chores. Instead, he became even more demanding. "With a child on the way, you need to clean more thoroughly. And calculate the calories when you make meals." As my sister had stated, I had hoped that having a child would make him more considerate of my health, but instead, he became even more critical, which was a huge letdown. A couple of days later, after a prenatal checkup which I attended during a day off from work, my sister, who had some free time, listened to my concerns. "He hasn't changed his attitude even with the baby coming? Maybe he won't feel it until the baby is actually here." Trying to lighten the mood, she joked, "My husband is simple, so if I were pregnant, he'd probably do anything I say, from cooking, cleaning, to laundry on his own." At one time, she envied my marriage, but now, I found myself envious of her. Concerned for me, she proposed, "This time, I'll come over to your place and see things for myself. I'll expose his true nature." After a while, on a day off, she visited our house and said to my husband, "This beautiful condominium is really something. Any baby born here would be fortunate." My husband, who only appeared kind outwardly, greeted her with a smile I had never seen before. "Not at all. Please make yourself at home." Michael then mentioned he was going to the sauna as usual, and left, allowing my sister and me to have a lengthy chat. Does he really like the sauna? It's quite trendy now. It seems he goes to the sauna after work too, and he always comes home late. After a pause, she speculated with a furrowed brow. Isn't that a bit suspicious? He couldn't be having an affair, could he? I had never even considered the possibility of his cheating, so I was too shaken to respond. Michael is rich and handsome, so it's possible. My husband isn't good-looking or wealthy, so at least I don't have to worry about that. I'll talk to my husband and we'll start investigating him. Despite my panic, she convinced me to proceed. If we look into it and find nothing, you'll be relieved, right? My brother-in-law has a contact who runs a detective agency, so they were going to conduct a thorough investigation. The thought of Michael possibly cheating made me even more despondent, but for the sake of our unborn child, I tried to stay positive. Even after asking them to look into Michael's possible infidelity, he continued to come home late, claiming he stopped by the sauna. As my pregnancy progressed and even washing dishes became a chore, Michael continued to offer no help, demanding, "Keep up the housework perfectly, as you always do." Outraged, I retorted, "How can I be perfect when my belly is this big? If you're going to complain that much, help out a little." Instead of understanding, he yelled even louder than usual. "Pregnancy isn't an illness. Don't slack off on the housework." I had already submitted my maternity leave notice at work, but he began demanding that I quit my job and become a full-time homemaker. Although we could survive on his income alone, I was ambiguous in my responses, considering the what-ifs. I wasn't sure if he was cheating, but even if he wasn't, I felt uncertain whether continuing to live with him was best for our child. My sister and her husband suggested I could decide whether to resign after seeing how things went during my maternity leave. "Don't worry, Candace. We'll take care of you and the baby if needed." I was very glad to hear her reassuring words. Not long after, I gave birth to a boy. My sister and her husband came to the hospital immediately. "Congratulations, Candace. A healthy boy, isn't he?" She said that joyfully, impressed. Noticing Michael's absence, my brother-in-law asked in wonder, "Has Michael already left?" Later, Michael arrived with his parents, but without showing much joy, and soon left. As I told them about Michael's behavior, they looked disgusted, but he mentioned, "It's an odd time to bring this up, but we'll soon know the results of the infidelity investigation." I don't know the details either, so let's wait a bit longer. Despite the newborn and not having the capacity to think about his potential affair, I wanted clarity for the sake of our baby. After spending about a month peacefully at my parents' house with my newborn son, where Michael never showed his face, my sister and her husband picked us up to return to the condominium, commenting bitterly, "What a terrible father, not coming to meet his beautiful child." Upon returning home, Michael behaved while my sister and her husband were there, but once they left, he immediately ordered me in a sour tone, "Take care of the baby on your own. I have work, so make sure he doesn't cry at night." Regardless, the baby would cry, and each time, Michael yelled at me. Hearing his shouts only made our son cry more, leading Michael to say, "I'm going to the sauna. Quiet him down by the time I get back." Dealing with childcare and household duties was challenging enough, but in addition, Michael constantly scolded me every time our son cried, and I couldn't take it anymore. Michael kept nitpicking my every move, demanding that meals be finished in 5 minutes and baths in 5 as well. When I talked back, he yelled loudly, frightening our son into tears. As Michael continued to rant, making it worse, I pleaded, "Please don't shout in front of the baby. He'll just cry more." At that, his anger was frightening, and from then on, I reluctantly kept silent, following his orders. 2 weeks after returning home, unable to bear it anymore, I confided in my sister, who promised gravely, "We'll handle it." One day, while Michael was drinking after dinner, I tried to finish my bath within 5 minutes, but I accidentally overstayed due to exhaustion. As I left the bathroom, he snapped, "Didn't I tell you not to bathe for more than 5 minutes? That's a punishment for breaking the promise." He then poured cold beer over my head. My scream made our son cry, and he smirked, "See, the kid's crying. I'm going to the sauna, make sure he's asleep by the time I get back." Understood. After I answered obediently, he left the house. About an hour later, he returned and asked with a refreshed expression, "Is the child asleep?" I coldly replied, Don't worry, he won't wake up again in this house. What do you mean he won't wake up again? You're not saying. Panicking, he glared at me as he spoke, but I reassured him, don't think anything strange. My sister has taken him. He's quietly sleeping at her house right now. He seemed relieved by the explanation, but then my brother-in-law emerged from the back room. Michael, you said you were going to the sauna, but you actually went to see your mistress, didn't you? The wealthy really are different, huh? He then showed him the report from the infidelity investigation. Michael, who hadn't expected him to be there, was shocked. However, he turned even paler when he heard about the infidelity investigation and fell silent. The report included photos of Michael entering his mistress's house and walking arm in arm with her. I also captured you throwing beer on her. This will serve as evidence of your abusive behavior. I didn't think you could be this terrible. Fueled by long-held grievances, I confronted him. I had my sister hire a private investigator because your actions were suspicious. I couldn't believe it, but you really were having an affair. I can't live with you anymore for our son's sake. I want a divorce. It would be sad for our son to be around someone like you. I finally said everything I had wanted to say, loudly and clearly. Despite being visibly shaken by the evidence of his infidelity, Michael suddenly became defiant. Fine. I'll pay the property division and child support, so just get out. I'm planning to remarry my girlfriend, and I'm not interested in you anymore. So, I took my essential belongings and left the house with my brother-in-law. At my sister's house, our innocent son was sleeping peacefully. Did it go well? My sister asked, concerned. I nodded silently, and my brother-in-law explained how Michael had reacted angrily. On that day, my sister and her husband had come to my house to discuss the situation and ended up discreetly witnessing Michael's usual behavior, including the beer-throwing incident, which my brother-in-law managed to capture on camera, revealing his true nature. Afterward, when I demanded property division and child support from Michael, the evidence of his affair and the video of him throwing beer made it impossible for him to deny, and he complied with all my demands. However, he couldn't pay on his own, so his wealthy father covered the costs but was furious about his actions and kicked him out of the condo he had been living in. His father's anger didn't subside, and he used his influence to have Michael demoted at his job. Michael, having originally secured his job through his father's connections, found himself transferred to a remote branch office. His father apologized to me, but Michael never apologized. According to his father, Michael, now living alone in a rural area with his salary halved, was also abandoned by his mistress. Meanwhile, I started living with my sister's family, where my son and I were happy. Additionally, she had become pregnant, which relieved my brother-in-law. Recently, I started dating a man introduced to me by my sister. He knows I'm divorced and he is kind to my son, which I appreciate. While we haven't discussed marriage specifically yet, I'm hopeful about the future for our families.